Today on Smacky's Garage, we're going to be working on my SkiDoo snowmobile. Now, on this sled, I've noticed when I went to start it this past weekend when I was riding it, it was really hard to start and it didn't want to run on one cylinder. So what I think is actually happening is the float's getting stuck or something on the carburetor and it's flooding the engine, making it hard to start. I'm going to show you step by step how to replace the floats on this Mikuni carburetor. Alright, now on the snowmobile, to get to the carburetor is relatively simple. This is an 800 engine, so all I gotta do is remove this and then remove the airbox. Airbox is held in by 2 screws, which you just need a long Phillips head to take out. And then there's a connector up in here that has one connection that I can flip up and then lift. And this should just pull out. There we have it, carburetors. So to do the floats, a few things that need to be removed. We need to take out the carburetor heat line. So there's a heat line here. There's another heater line on the other side. And then we need to disconnect all these hoses from here. I like to pull the carburetor to do this. I don't know if you have to. You could probably do it in place and leave these lines still on for the throttle and for the choke, but I am gonna end up pulling them. And then there are some screws back here that need to be taken off. And then after you get those out, you can just go ahead and pull this out. As long as everything's disconnected, including that solenoid back there. So solenoid lines just come right out like that. Then these I'm gonna have to plug, and then the fuel line down in the back here, I'm gonna have to remove and plug. Now the first thing I'm gonna do is remove these throttle and choke lines with a 10mm. So these are, I like removing these. I always reset them. So I end up just pulling everything off and redoing it myself. Only the throttle one has a lock washer on it. Choke does not. So as soon as these are both free, I like to pull up on the choke. I can pull on all the way over here. So that goes all the way up, and then you just need to slide this line out of this clip. It's really hard to show on camera, but there's a place to slide this through. Then after that one's out, you can just pull it out of the way. Do the same thing for the throttle. Same process. You have to open up the throttles all the way, and then you can do that. So I like to pull on the throttle right here, and then that comes out too. With those removed, we're going to go ahead and take these lines off just to make our lives easier. Get a little bit more room. So now there's a connector back here on the back side of the carburetor. It's kind of hard to see. I believe it's the throttle position sensor. So you take that out. That is out. So next we're going to take out both the coolant lines. So I have the one here, and then there's one back here. This is off, so it's not going to leak off this side. This side would leak off the tank, so I need to make sure that we cap that or put it higher than the fluid level in the tank. Oh, coolant's coming out. Then we're going to do the other side. It's going to be right here. You're not going to be able to see it on camera, but it is on the back. Now, with all those lines removed, we can go ahead and move on to the back here. Now, to remove this solenoid valve, so right here, the connector, there's this metal bracket right here that you have to pull up and out. It's kind of hard to see, but it is right there. So to do that, you can pull that out, then you can remove the connector on the solenoid valve. Do not lose that because they are not easy to come by. So take it out, put it somewhere safe, then remove the connector. You can see I already removed the heater that's on there, so that is off. So now that I'm here, this hose for the antifreeze is disconnected. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the carbs themselves. So the best way to do this is my tool of choice, the extremely long Phillips head screwdriver, because it makes it a lot easier. And then after both of those are loose, the carbs should just come out. So you can see they're falling straight forward. And your carburetors are now semi-free. So then remove that line, and then the only line that's really left is going to be fuel. So the fuel line, I'll have to show you where it is, and then we'll go ahead and take it up on the bench. So the fuel line is right there. You just use vice grips, use pliers, something to pull it off, and then that has to be lifted up and capped because gas tank is here. That needs to be above the gas tank or else fuel's going to start coming out. So some big pliers, we're going to pull that out and we're going to block it. Pretty easy to move off. It's typically the hose itself is the hardest to get off because they get old, they start breaking. We have that off. And see, technically you could do the float with it in the carburetor right now. So I could flip this over, do all the work here, but I want to show you guys on the bench, so we'll bring it up over there. Typically my go-to is a small screwdriver that I can just stick in here and pry this out. But just note the gas will be coming out of the carburetors if you have these upside down. I'm going to jam a screw in it. Then I'm going to close this on that screw. And then leave it up high. Then you have your carburetor. All right, so pretty simple process to take care of this. All we really have to do is take off the float bowls down here, and then it's going to expose the floats. So pretty easy to do. Oop, gas is pouring literally everywhere. But you're working with the carburetor. You know there's going to be fuel all over the place. So be safe. So we're going to go ahead and remove the float bowls first. So this one over here is 17 millimeters. So there's going to be two big plugs here, two drains here, and then there's going to be two Phillips heads on either side that need to be removed. So I'm going to go ahead and take these bigger ones off first. And any fuel that's left in the drain in here will now come out, as you can see. And we'll go ahead and take off these Phillips heads, which will take off the float bowl covers. We'll flip everything upside down. Now with both those off, you can see both floats are now exposed. So these are what the floats look like. These are what we're going to be replacing. You can see they've definitely colored over time, and we're going to be replacing these with a set of SP1 parts floats. For carb floats, I always go with high quality. This isn't something you want to mess around with, especially if it screws up, you know it's going to burn down your engine. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these Phillips heads and then go ahead on and replace them. All right, let's do this side first. And as I'm removing these, I do notice a little bit of blue thread locker on each one of the tips of the screws, so we're going to put some of that back on. So these carb floats I will link in the description below. I did purchase them off Amazon, made sure that they were the right style, and you can see that they look pretty much identical, if not identical, to the OEM ones. The OEM ones are ridiculously priced, so that's the reason why I went with these. And then you can go ahead, take a look, make sure there's nothing that needs to be cleaned up in there. Everything looks good. O-ring here looks good. Can just drop it back into place. Goes in a little tight, and then we're going to have to add some more Loctite to these right here. For these sled projects, blue Loctite, extremely important to have on hand. So that's one side. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, then we'll go ahead and look at this together and then put it back together. This one kind of just shot out of place, which is interesting. So this screw does not want to come out of the plastic, which is why it shot up. All right, so this one, whoever put it in last got thread locker all over the bolt, which is why it's kind of stuck inside of here. I don't know if it ever seated perfectly when this was done. I don't think I've taken these floats out, but do want to clean some of this up. I don't know if it's visible here, but we'll clean it up and then redo it. Because this wasn't perfectly seated, there's a chance that Maybe this thing didn't sit down all the way and was allowing gas to go by, but I don't know. You can check these by blowing through it to see if you can blow air through it in both positions. So they feel fine, but with some of this other junk built up on it, I don't know if it was sealing well. Or if the floats were floating and in the position they need to be, but they're getting replaced. I do like the fit of the new ones better. I feel like the O-rings are seating a little bit easier. All right, now we can go ahead and take a look at this, make sure everything's connected, everything's moving freely. So these should be able to float up and down. They should be bouncing a little bit. Everything here should be flush, which is good. I did not check these by blowing through them. Probably should have, but that's fine. Then we got to get all the mounting surfaces cleaned up and put back together. Now, for these, relatively simple. They just go right back on the top. I do like to replace these gaskets when I can. They usually get pretty hard pretty easily, but I've run them multiple times and not major issues. Now you can see this one has been leaking some, which is not great. And the root cause of a lot of the leaks around here are actually the O-rings on these. These are extremely expensive to come by and hard to come by. I was looking them up. Buying them from SkiDoo, very expensive. You can actually buy O-rings and put them in place here, which is what I've done on this one to help this seal. So you're probably better off, if you do see leaks around here, buying one of these O-rings to seal up. These go back on. Then I'd say important to clean these up to make sure everything is very clear. If something is leaking, you can see it. So I'm gonna go ahead, clean all these up, and we'll come back together. So back in we go, just the complete opposite way that we took it out. Now, as you're putting it back together, it's incredibly important to make sure that these boots and everything are sitting completely flat against the carburetor, because you don't want to have a leak in between the carburetor and the engine itself, or the intake. All right, so we're all back together, so we can go ahead and give this a shot to get started. Now, it's going to take a few extra pulls to get everything running. I don't have the airbox in, so I'm going to get an air light for that, but I will be able to see if any fuel or anything's leaking down there, which is kind of what I'm going for. Now, after you get your sled running, the last important thing you need to do is check the carburetors to make sure that nothing's leaking from there. You don't want any gas dumping out. And you've taken out all the float bowl seals. So if anything's flowing down there, if there's any gas at all, you need to take your carburetor apart, find that leak, and fix that seal. So that's as easy as it is on the sled to replace the float assemblies on these carburetors. It's just really straightforward, really simple. Just a lot of things need to come apart. Thanks for tuning in this week on Smacky's Garage. I'll see you next time.